It is episode 135 of Decoding Fox News, and I'm your host, Juliet Jeske. Each week, I watch and analyze a whole heck of a lot of Fox News, and then break it down. I watch all the Fox News you'd never want to. This past week, it was just 15 hours. Yay! I made it. You could probably tell I have a bit of a cold. It's just viral. You can tell no fever, no COVID, just a nasty, stupid cold. As we get, that it's very difficult to shake once you get one. So anyway, moving on. Here's the headline. Fox News. Misinformation means we will promote Trump's lies no matter what.
Let's talk about some of the misinformation that is out there.
And so for Peter to ask the question that most Americans that are in this tragedy are feeling, and for her to reject it as disinformation, you don't like the question, right? But it's not disinformation. Yeah. That everything was going to be fine, didn't he?
Peter's question was not disinformation or misinformation. That was just a fact.
This is just their go-to when they're in trouble, and it's quite sinister given the threats that both Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have made about free speech. They say that there's no guarantee to free speech when it comes to what they deem to be misinformation or disinformation. They will bring down the heavy hammer.
Indeed. And so this week they're using disinformation, misinformation. You are spreading misinformation, mister.
But what is all of this misinformation they're so worried about? If anyone is amplifying disinformation from fringe sources, it's the Democrats themselves. Okay, so now one random woman that he ran into makes a CNN disinformation narrative?
Laura, for anything they don't like to hear, they label it misinformation or disinformation. But to just dismiss criticism and calling it misinformation is a joke.
She just kept repeating the same misinformation talking point, it's all that's misinformation.
Right.
But when you're framing criticism of the government as misinformation, it feels like another get around free speech thing.
It is the party that cried misinformation, what really happened with the Biden-Harris hurricane response and why they refused to accept any criticism.
Where's the misinformation? One of the best in the business, Matt Taibbi. You see him and read him on Substack, joins us now. Matt, what's behind this big move to talk about misinformation and blaming Donald Trump specifically for it?
Well, they keep changing the definition of misinformation and disinformation, and they have another category they call malinformation.
People who were talking to reporters in North Carolina saying, I have family members who don't think FEMA is here because of the misinformation coming out of Donald Trump, other Republicans.
There's so much going on with that montage. I had a lot of fun putting that one together. My favorite is Matt Taibbi's brilliant edition of, well, there's misinformation, there's disinformation, and malinformation. And then he just starts talking about something else. Like, what? Wow, we've got the expert here on Fox News. I will make fun of him even with half a voice. So last week on Fox, the term misinformation became a code word for a crackdown on free speech, while Vice President Kamala Harris was vilified for not doing enough and for doing too much to help hurricane victims. Kayleigh McEnany's friend might have met a black person. Melania Trump was pushing her merch on the 5, while Jessica Tarloff revealed Trump's God Bless the USA Bibles were printed in China. The vice president could not win over Fox News hosts if she single-handedly saved a kindergarten class on Bring Your Pet to School Day from floodwaters in North Carolina. If Harris found a way to personally restore power to hundreds of thousands of remote mountain homes, the Murdoch-owned network would criticize her for not doing it fast enough. Fox News cheers Donald J. Trump on as he crushes the hopes of hurricane victims who might falsely believe they'll only get $750 from FEMA or believe his lie that the agency has gone broke from paying for programs for undocumented immigrants. The end game for Fox News is a Trump win in November. Several thousand Fox News superfans who might miss out on federal benefits are no reason to stop the network from peddling Trump's lies. Anyone watching Fox News exclusively last week might have missed out on several updates in the war in Ukraine, more alarming news about the global climate crisis, and more good news for the U.S. economy. Shows I covered last week were Fox and Friends, The Five, and The Ingram Angle. And I didn't have to do any extra hours. It was amazing. It was amazing. It never happens, but it happened. So I want to go backtrack a little bit back into that montage because there was something very alarming that Miranda Devine said. So I'm going to play that clip again, just Miranda Devine.
This is just their go-to when they're in trouble, and it's quite sinister given the threats that both Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have made about free speech. They say that there's no guarantee to free speech when it comes to what they deem to be misinformation or disinformation. They will bring down the heavy hammer.
I want to use that clip as an example of like classic propaganda. She makes accusations against Vice President Kamala Harris and Tim Walz that are vague, that are broad, that are alarming. She doesn't recall a specific speech. She doesn't use any specifics in her example. She just says, oh, this is what they're going to do. I do remember Kamala Harris making a comment about free speech isn't always guaranteed, and she was referring to social media companies, which are privately held companies which are allowed by law to set standards. And if they want to kick somebody off for screaming threats at another person, they can. Just like, you know, there's I believe Tim Walz was saying something about fire in a crowded theater. If you say something that is so, rises to the point that people think you might be inciting immediate violence, that's also not protected speech. That has to be, I've talked about this many times, in order for you to rise to the level that you are at the point where you have to say, this is not protected speech. You have to basically be in a crowd, point to a specific person, turn to a crowd and say, go hurt him, go kill him. That is not protected speech because the threat is immediate and specific. But you can stand on a podium in a public square and say, I want to kill all the blank, or I think all the blank should die. That's protected speech. I know it might seem alarming, but that is still considered protected speech. If you're talking about like a general group, it's awful. You'll probably have a lot of people yell at you. You might have people threaten you if you're that bold, but that's how this works. I included that last clip by Jessica Tarloff to sort of show she's trying to sound the alarm of like why this is a bad idea to promote disinformation, misinformation about a hurricane. And about, you know, hurricane relief. There's been an update. So yesterday, according to reporting by NBC News, a man named William Jacob Parsons, an armed man in North Carolina, was arrested after he made comments about possibly harming FEMA employees. Before Parsons was identified as a threat, government emergency workers were relocated over concerns about threats of an armed militia. The sheriff's office did not find any evidence of an armed militia in the area. From what I was able to garner from these articles is William Jacob Parsons was probably the person making the threats. And it got turned into an armed militia. So yeah, that's bad. That's why you don't want to lie to people. And I would say that most of what comes out of Trump's mouth is disinformation, and that he knows he's telling a lie and he's doing it for a political purpose. He's doing it to harm people. In this case, he's thinking, I'm going to harm Kamala Harris. I'm going to harm Joe Biden. He doesn't care. He doesn't care what the consequences are. That's the man lies as often as he breathes. So moving on to the folks on Fox should watch their own network. We're going to have a bit of a repeat of a clip on this one. So this is sort of a part of a clip. So on Wednesday on the 5, this was very entertaining for me to watch because I think I'm the only person who made a montage of Sean Hannity promoting the false claim that people were only going to get $750. So I made that little montage. It went viral. It was in my last podcast, and here we are using it again. But Wednesday, I just sat back going, you people don't watch your own network. Sean Hannity is the highest paid person on your network, and you guys aren't watching his show. That's obvious. So here we go. This is on the 5, a bunch of people denying the fact that this $750 myth had started.
They said that Trump said that people weren't going to get any more than $750. We looked. Trump never said that.
On the $750 issue, It wasn't Trump that said it. I don't know who started it.
Like Lara Trump, she was the one who said the 750. She was on with Dana Bash, trying to have, I guess, a nice conversation or get some hits in.
So Jessica Tarlov is half right. The other two are wrong. Lara Trump did say it, but so did Donald J. Trump. Roll the tape.
They send hundreds of billions of dollars to foreign nations. And you know what they're giving our people? $750. They're offering them $750 to people whose homes have been washed away.
So that is from Saturday and Sunday from this past weekend. But last week on Thursday, Sean Hannity, the top paid person on Fox News, started saying it several times on his show, and he also repeated the same thing on Friday.
$750. She comes out and offers $750. $750.
We didn't find out until yesterday that they're offering a one-time payment of $750. Americans are offered a one-time $750 payment. But if you're in your, so far, a one-time $750 payment.
So I don't know who came up with that false rumor about $750 being the one-time payment, but I just showed evidence that Sean Hannity said it on Thursday. He also said it on Friday, and that Trump said it on both Saturday and Sunday of last week. So I obviously recorded that clip before I was sick. It's like listening to an old friend. Hey, old friend. Hey, old trusty voice that's now shot. It's fabulous. Okay. I mean, there's nothing I could do. I can't really wait to do this podcast because then it's going to be so old it'll be pointless. And this is a type of job, I try to explain this to people. It is like sewage backing up. I'll say sewage. It's Fox News. I'm calling Fox News sewage. If you don't get through it, it just backs up. So if I take a day off, I just have a double day the next day that I have to get through. There's no way to pace it because it's live and it happens. I wish I could take all the PBSs and get through them on Monday. That's not how it works. So it's one of those gigs where it's like a treadmill, and it's like, I always say, like the Lucy factory. I Love Lucy. There's a scene in I Love Lucy where she's in a candy factory and the conveyor belt just starts going too fast and she can't get through it. She starts trying to eat them to get through it. It's like, ha ha, comedy. That's the skig. Only sewage because it's Fox. Anyway, I'm kidding around, but here we go. Here's the next clip is Kamala cannot win the hurricane gig. This is from Thursday, the 5. Judge Jeanine Pirro points out what I kept talking about last week on the podcast about why it's difficult when vice presidents and presidents show up to a disaster area. Here's the clip.
But what she has done is she's actually interfered with the handling of this rescue before in North Carolina on October 5th. I believe it was 8 days after the storm. People had still not gotten water and heat. They were still finding bodies. And the senators, both United States senators, complained about there being less than 500 people sent there by FEMA. She actually flew into Charlotte, North Carolina. As a result of that, the flight zone was closed. The FAA closed that flight zone for 4 hours, and they were unable to get any rescues. No rescues could happen during that time because she needed to be so egocentric to be right in the middle of that emergency field.
I don't know how many people were screaming about why it's not a good idea for president or vice president to go to a disaster area right after it happened. Of course, Fox was going to criticize them for not being there, but they actually do cause all kinds of problems when they show up because of the security. Judge Jeanine just described it. Now, let's go through the timeline, however. So the hurricane hit September 26th. Trump visited Georgia, this town called Valdosta. My apologies if I'm mispronouncing it. On September 30th, 4 days after Hurricane Helene caused major damage to that area. Harris waited 9 days after the disaster. So let's just do basic math here. Which is more likely to screw up rescue operations? 4 days after a hurricane, 9 days after a hurricane. That should be obvious. If somebody's still trapped somewhere 9 days after a hurricane, they may not be alive. Because that's a long time to wait without getting any help. Because you may not have food or water, you may not have anything, right? 4 days, much closer. Now, both houses in Congress recently passed a bill that would increase the former president's security to the same level as the sitting president. I don't know 100% if that's official. Couldn't find that, unfortunately. I found that it was passed passed the House, passed the Senate. It's safe to assume that Trump's arrival to a disaster zone would also cause similar disruptions for rescue and recovery missions. Pirro and her co-host raised no concern over Trump's visit. So now we got another take on this FEMA thing. They can't stop, can they? And this kind of ties into that last clip. Now, this is from Ingram, the Ingram angle, on Tuesday. This is kind of funny because she's taking a video that you're going to hear in the middle of this clip. It's 2 years old, completely out of context, because that's what they do. Here you go.
All right, well, we know what's happening here on a political level. The Biden and Harris administration do not want a repeat of what, to the people on the ground, believed was a disastrous handling of that, especially that first week after Hurricane Helene hit. But unfortunately for Americans in harm's way, the regime didn't prioritize disaster management. Instead, they chose to install another woke radical as FEMA administrator.
So let me describe this clip a little bit before I play it. It looks like it's a Zoom meeting, just two people talking in their homes, or one is in an office, I think. I don't remember. But the video is labeled CNAS, March 25th, 2022. That stands for the Center for a New American Security, which is a think tank out of Washington specializing in national security issues. The first voice that you're going to hear is Carrie Cordero. She's a member of Homeland Security Advisory Council. And then the second voice is Deanne Criswell, administrator of FEMA.
Goal number one of the strategic plan for FEMA is to instill equity as a foundation of emergency management.
It's a really important part of my vision when I came into the agency, and I'm happy to see how it's evolved through the development of our strategic plan. By creating this diverse workforce is incredibly important to better represent the communities that we're helping.
DEI, priorities. Well, sure enough. Instilling equity, as she said, is the first goal of the FEMA strategic plan for the years 2022 through 2026. It's right on the website. There are systemic differences in society that access alone cannot fix. FEMA must direct its resources to eliminate disparities in these outcomes. So our question tonight, how many resources were diverted from FEMA's actual mission to this DEI insanity?
Here's what I'm betting happened here. That either a right-wing organization or a bunch of interns at Fox, maybe both, got together, went through transcripts from everything they could find on FEMA. And they searched for words such as, you could do this with coding. There's all kinds of ways to do this so it goes faster. Where you look for words like equity, you look for words like diversity, right? And they found it, and they find that tiny little clip. That's like nothing. It's like two people talking for 2 sentences each. That's it. One person, two person. That's it. And they're going to balloon that into FEMA's woke and overtaken by DEI. And that's where all the resources are going. What? What are you talking about? Here's how it works. This is a government agency. Don't you think this is common sense with a country as diverse as the United States? If you had a disaster happen in an area where people mostly speak Spanish, don't you think it would be useful to have a Spanish speaker go to that area? Yes, right? That makes sense. If you have an area where people are Muslim, don't you think it would be helpful to have a Muslim employee go to that area? Yes, you don't know where a disaster is going to happen. A state like Florida, where disasters tend to happen a lot because of hurricanes, has a very diverse population. There's 22 million people there. So you're going to have pockets of people who, aren't boring white Midwesterners, who might, culturally feel more comfortable with somebody who is culturally more similar to them. That's how this works. That's kind of government agency 101. They all work that way. They want people to feel comfortable. They want people to feel like they can trust that FEMA employee. And when you have, everybody's white. You don't want that. You don't want everybody's white coming in from the government. Nobody could speak a foreign language. That's bad. It's bad for FEMA. That's all that means. And when you talk about like equity and making sure the resources are equitable, that means it's not just the business, the big business, the store that gets relief, that it's also the person in the trailer, that it's also the person in the small house who's, in the valley that got hit hard, or the person who didn't really have any resources, the elderly, the senior citizen. Give me a break. I also want to add that just this past year, PBS did a great segment about how disabled people are more likely to die in a natural disaster than a typical person. And it's because if they have problems being ambulatory or moving around without assistance, something like a flood that some of us could run from or get away from very quickly. If you need a wheelchair, you may not be able to do that. Or if your wheelchair becomes damaged because of a storm or flooding, then you're just stuck, you're stranded. There's so many things that can happen to somebody who's disabled. That's part of equity. That's part of equity. And I'm sure the good folks at Fox have friends, loved ones, friends, relatives who are disabled. This idea, Fox News likes to frame equity as if it's somehow, white, hardworking, middle-class people, something's getting taken away from them when somebody's like, hey, let's make this more equitable. It's not what's happening. It's just saying, let's make it fair for people who may not have the same things that you have. Let's just make it fair. So the person in the wheelchair doesn't die when there's a hurricane. So somebody who doesn't speak English feels comfortable talking to an agent who also speaks Spanish. It's just the forced outrage by these people is just constant. They try to insert DEI into everything too, which is ridiculous. So for next up, we're going to switch topics. So it's time to give a shout out to my sponsor. And who would that sponsor be? That would be the listeners of this podcast and the readers of my Substack. That's right. I don't have a large sponsor. I don't have advertisers. I don't have a billionaire writing a check every month and pulling my strings. I have no strings. I'm a crazed independent journalist who can do whatever and say whatever I want. And that's a good thing because an editor cannot kind of put me in a box and say, don't say this, don't say that. You want people like me. You want more people like me out there. So if you want to become a financial supporter of Decoding Fox News, I can always use your help. It's $5 a month or $55 for a year. I also have a sponsor founders level at $168 a year. There's only a few people on that. Thank you so much. You can also help out at Patreon, and I have various levels over there. All paid subscribers and paid supporters get exclusive content. I also want to address something very quickly because somebody was concerned on Twitter about this. They said, oh, you've had some health issues. I have. They're not related. Just want to specify this. The issue that I had a few weeks ago where I kept getting sick and needed antibiotics, which I did twice in a row, that was the same issue. It's a chronic problem, and I'm on treatment for it. I'm fine. That's good. We're good to go. Basically, what happened there is the first round of antibiotics didn't work, and I had to go on a different antibiotic. So it was a nightmare because Augmentin is a ride. Augmentin is a ride. When you take it when you're young, it's like, oh, I'm on this heavy-duty antibiotic. No big deal. When you take it when you're not young, it's like, oh, my goodness. Wow. This is hard. And right now, this is just a random cold that I got out of nowhere. I have asthma, though, so I have to watch it. So anyway, that's all. I don't have any sort of major health problem. It's just like two weird things that happen to come at the same time. Now, this next one is my favorite. This is my favorite one of my favorites of all time, because it was Melania Trump thinking it would be a brilliant idea to do an interview on the Five #1 rated show on Fox. They don't do a lot of interviews like this. This is rare. And they thought, let's give her a boost for this stupid book called Melania, which she did not write. Most of these books are not written by the people who claim they wrote the book. But anyway, so this is a quick clip. This is her trying to promote her book.
I have two platforms, melaniatrump.com and usmemorabilia.com, that support scholarships for fostering children and fostering community.
So just to give you all a heads up on the mascots of the podcast, Odin, the larger of my two cats, the all-black chic void, as it were, has decided he's jumping on my lap. So now he's part of the podcast. Just picture that. Anyway, hi Odin, how you doing? Anyway, so I had a clue that she was full of nonsense when she said the name of both of her websites. She said MelaniaTrump.com and USMemorabilia.com. And those were her platforms where she supported scholarships for fostering children and fostering community. And I went, wait a second. I've already looked through USMemorabilia.com. And the reason why I did is because she had promoted some ad, or it was the Trump campaign. I don't know, but I saw some ad on Twitter that was like, relive the magic of Christmas. And it was these big, tacky brass ornaments designed by former First Lady Melania Trump. And I was like, are you kidding me? The Christmas lady is trying to sell ornaments? I have to check them out. So I'd already been through the website at length. I mean, I went through the whole freaking thing. And so I was like, there's nothing about charity on that website. What are you talking about, lady? So I clipped her saying that. The name of the website is US Memorabilia. I may have said it incorrectly before. US Memorabilia, which I had been through, again, like I said, the entire thing backward and forward. Because I tend to get obsessed with things I hate. It's a true story. It's why I have this job. Anyway, so I'm looking through the whole thing, and I have an entire detailed list, including prices, on the newsletter if you want to check it out. Every single item that she's hawking on this ridiculous website that looks like a fourth grader made it. Okay, it's very rudimentary. So she's got her book, which is priced from $40 to $250. She's got a bunch of Christmas ornaments that are priced as low as $35 all the way up to $90. Then she sells these ridiculous things called digital collectibles, also known as NFTs, non-fungible tokens. They're completely worthless, but it's sort of a scam of like, well, there's a limited edition of these. Okay. So she's selling those. Nothing about a charity. The frequently asked questions on the website open the whole thing up. It's just explaining what NFTs are, non-fungible tokens, also known as digital collectibles. So that's it. Nothing, not one word about a charity. So I went to MelaniaTrump.com. This has sections called publishing, jewelry, collectibles, Christmas ornaments, be best, fostering the future, communications, although it's spelled in French for no reason, communiques, and USA collectibles, which takes you back to the website I just described. Also, frequently asked questions. No, in this website, she has jewelry priced anywhere from $245 to $600. Then she has these stupid collectibles again that are priced a little bit pricier, $250. She has one Christmas ornament. Be Best is a brief background on her Be Best initiative while she was First Lady. Included a brief 3.5-minute video that I couldn't even get to play on the website. I had to go to YouTube. Then Fostering the Future. I thought, okay, here, we found it. We found it. Here's the charity. No. It's a brief explanation of educational opportunities and scholarships for children in the foster care community. That's it. No click to donate. It included email links for corporate sponsorship information. So I'd have to email them first for that. Email them for a link of how I could donate. Email for a link for educational institutions interested in participating. An email for a link for students interested in scholarship opportunities. That's ridiculous. There should be, here's my foundation. Here are my board members. I'm a 503c, meaning I'm a nonprofit. All of that should be on the website. When I looked through all of those crazy think tanks and foundations that were associated with Project 2025, a lot of them were nonprofits, and they all had that on there. They all had board members. Here are our board members. This is what type of charity we are. This is the kind of gift you can give us. We are a 501c nonprofit. That means I can look them up. I can open up their books. Anybody can. And I can look at all of their tax returns. Usually not the very recent one, but you can look at, for anybody can do this. If you look up a nonprofit, if it's a legal nonprofit, you can look up every single tax return and you can see where their money's going. She doesn't have any of that because she's not really running a charity. It's a scam. Anyway, it's so gross. So for the communiques section of her website, it has links to official correspondence from her, and then USA Collectibles takes you back to that other website, and then FAQ just describes digital collectibles again. That's it. There's no mention of like a portion of this goes to a charity or you'll be helping kids. Nothing. If you were running a legitimate charity, you would have specific information on your website, which she does not have. So that is just, so gross. And just to reiterate, because I think it's kind of an interesting tool I can share with you, by law, nonprofits have to kind of open their books for anybody. So it's not that I go up to a nonprofit and say, hey, give me your accountant. Let's go. But they put their tax returns in a public area where you can look at them. And that's so if you or I decide I want to work with this charity, I want to donate to this charity, I can see exactly where their money's going. It's not going to show you everything. There's still ways to hide money. There's still ways to do shady things. But it gives you a rough idea of like, what are the salaries of the executives? What do they spend on rent? What do they spend on, do they have money in holding? A lot of charities have a lot of money in holding. Depends on the charity. So that's what a normal nonprofit would do. It's all open. It's all transparent, which she's not. So that makes me very suspicious. This next one was really fun. I was shocked at how this one went viral. This is about auto workers for Trump. This is from Tuesday. Laura Ingraham had a man named Brian Panbecker on to talk about his organization, Auto Workers for Trump. Here you go.
Why are the elites going for Kamala, but the regular folks are going for Trump?
You know, Laura, I could care less. I represent the Auto Workers for Trump. That's my organization.
Now, with a group like Auto Workers for Trump, if they're not raising money, they can do whatever they want. They don't have to have a tax return. They don't have to be official, anything. You just be a club. We're Auto Workers for Trump. Couldn't find much on this organization at all, except for everything went back to this guy. So I found what looked like his personal Facebook page that included some of his work history. And from what I could tell, he had worked for both Ford Motor Company and Chrysler, which is now known as Stellantis North America. The company was renamed Stellantis following a merger with Huguenot SA in 2021. I might be saying that wrong. Huguenot, whatever. It's French. I don't know. I have no voice. I'm holding on for dear life. So Getty's Images also had Panbecker captioned as a retired automaker in an image with Donald J. Trump. This makes sense because all of his history, his work history said worked past tense. And when you're claiming Chrysler, which changed its name in 2021, you probably haven't worked there for a minute. So anyway, so this is Jessica Tarloff from The Five also bringing up the same organization.
On Tuesday, J.D. Vance had a rally there, and there were guys wearing Auto Workers for Trump shirts that weren't actually auto workers, so just paid to wear the T-shirt there. Fair.
You made a point in the last segment about people wearing T-shirts that didn't work in the auto industry. I looked into it. It's another Jessica hoax that just took about a commercial break to debunk.
Okay.
So apparently last week I did something called Live the Week, which I don't remember doing. I don't remember half the stuff that comes out of my mouth when I do this podcast. Some of it's scripted and some of it is just pulled from my brain in the moment. But this could be easily the lie of the week. Here we go. Lie of the week. Notice, Jesse Waters didn't have any proof to back him up. He didn't say, oh, I read this article or blah, blah. He just said, oh, I found it in 30 seconds. Ha, ha, ha. No, you're wrong. So, here we go. According to reporting by Detroit News, who you think would be there, this article was dated October 8th. Here's the quote. Several hundred people attended the event, including more than a dozen who were wearing Auto Workers for Trump shirts. However, 6 of the people in the shirts told the Detroit News on Tuesday that they were not actually auto workers. Bing, bing, bing. Jessica Tarloff for the win. You're a liar, Jesse Waters. You're a liar. You're not a good researcher. Okay, here's another one. That's just, Jessica Tarloff was on fire last week. She was on fire. Okay, this one was on Friday on the 5. And here she is bringing up a little detail, which I double checked. Found an article in the AP that supports what she says here. So this has been verified. She's talking about the overpriced Bibles that Trump is selling. Here you go.
So the numbers are not as pronounced in terms of turning against him, but you do see some slippage, is that religious voters see a person who has a bad character. They see someone who is an adulterer. They see someone who demonizes migrants, who demeans women. And that is something that is resonating from the Harris campaign. They are making that case, and they are getting somewhere with that. You see someone, this God Bless America Bible that he has, that he printed 120,000 copies of in China, so the America First guy that's producing his Bible in China, costs $3 to make it. He's hawking them for $59.99 here. Those are things that people who are actually religious, who care about it, are looking at it and saying, like, is this guy just a huckster?
So her co-host really had nothing to say to that. They just started yelling over her, changed the subject, and went to commercial because they couldn't touch this. So according to reporting by the Associated Press, Trump's God Bless the USA Bible is printed in China. Global trade records reviewed by the Associated Press show a printing company in China's eastern city of Hangzhou shipped close to 120,000 of the Bibles to the United States between early February and late March. Trump started selling God Bless the USA Bibles in March for $59.99. It's like $60. The book is part of a joint venture with the country singer Lee Greenwood, who was promoting his version of the Bible over a year ago on Fox. I remember it because I thought it was ridiculous. So the Bible also features a copy of handwritten chorus to God Bless the USA. So that would be Lee Greenwood's material. He would own that. The rest of it, the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, the Pledge of Allegiance, those are all part of the public domain. So Trump or Greenwood is not paying for rights for that. And you can find those anywhere. You can find those anywhere. You can find those online. You can go to a library. Those are things that are available to anyone at any time. There's a reason to put it. And I don't know what our government has to do with Jesus Christ, but okay. It's very strange. Very strange. Trump is also selling 1,000 hand-signed copies for $1,000 each, and there's no mentions of any proceeds going to charity, also like his wife. He also is selling NFT, which is, again, digital collectibles, non-fungible tokens. He sold several versions of trading cards. He's selling high-top sneakers, gold and silver coins, and $100,000 watches. So, yeah, there you go. None of the proceeds going to charity that I'm aware of. None of them. Grifter. So this next clip I added just because I thought it was funny. This is Kayleigh McEnany almost met a black person. That's what I called this. Here we go. This is from Friday on the 5. And yes, I fell over laughing.
Yeah, I don't think so. Look, I heard yesterday from a friend who texted me and said that he was talking to a black man in North Carolina. And this black man said, I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. And he pulled out his wallet and he said, this needs help.
So yeah, to go over that again, because it was pretty quick, but I heard it. I was just like, what is wrong with you? She just said her friend, who it's inferred is a white person, texted her that he talked to a black person, an unnamed black person. And then this quote going through this white friend going through her, boom, she, hand on the pulse. She has her hand on the pulse of the black community. Boom, chuck, she knows. Black men are going to vote for Trump because her friend talked to a black person. Maybe one day, Kayleigh McEnany, you'll meet a black person too. Maybe you will, and you'll talk to them. Amazing. This is why white people should just, generally speaking, don't talk for black. Just don't do it. Just shut up. If your sentence starts with black people, just shut up. Unless it is, I love black people. Don't do it. Do not. This is like a code. Because probably what's going to come out of your mouth after you start with black people and then you add a verb, it's going to be bad. You're going to look like a jerk. So just shut up. Don't do it. Let black people speak for themselves. Amazing. Like, you want to know, hand on the pulse of the childless cat ladies who live in Brooklyn. Boom, Chuck, I'm going to be there. I'm going to tell you all about it. I'm going to be like, listen, childless cat ladies who live in Brooklyn do not like Donald J. Trump for the most part. We don't. See, there's no race there, so I could just, all the childless cat ladies in Brooklyn. I can't really speak for them all, but I have a hunch. Because I know childless cat ladies. But I'm not going to be speaking for another race. Oh, no. Because there's that whole cliche of, well, I have a black friend who said. But when you say, I have a friend who texted me and my friend talked to a black person, it's like, oh, honey, could you just listen to yourself? Just stop, take a minute. Don't sit. Because you just look like an idiot. You look like an idiot. Don't do that. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my. I was just like, wow, that's just, it's like next level. She went to the next level of I have a black friend. It reminded me of one time they had Will Kane. It's one of my favorite crazy, bad, it's when I first started this account. So the not a lot of people saw this clip. They should have, because it was chef's kiss crazy. It was Will Kane who did like a heart-to-heart to the camera where he was speaking to black fathers. And I was like, you couldn't find a black man anywhere at Fox to do this. You had to use Will Kane. You had to use Will Kane. Because what he said wasn't great. It was a bunch of racial stereotypes. It was negative. It was horrible. It was awful. And I was like, could we just, you don't have a black man that works there. You just, come on, there are. Charles Payne. You couldn't get Charles Payne to do this. You had to get Will Kane, the whitest of white guys. Like, let me talk down condescendingly to black people. Like, just, oh my goodness. Oh, it was like just filled with negative stereotypes. I was cringing. I was dying deep inside because I was like, why? Don't do that. Please don't do that. Anyway, it's awful. It's awful. Okay, I can't do an impression because I don't really have much of a voice. But again, if I didn't do this, it would get backed up. When would I do it? I don't know when my voice is going to come back. Woohoo! Fun times. Got a soldier on. Show must go on. Here we go. Next up, stories Fox News ignored. Every week, I compare the hours I've watched on Fox News to 5 hours of the PBS NewsHour. Due to space, I have truncated this a little bit because they got really into the weeds with the Nobel Prize winners and a bunch of SCOTUS, and it was just way too long. So I just, boom, I provide you hyperlinks if you'd like to see everything. So here we go. Climate disasters. The year 2023 was the driest year for the world's rivers in 3 decades. Glaciers have lost the most mass in half a century. Updates in the war in Ukraine. The Ukrainian parliament voted to increase taxes to help pay for the war. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met with the new UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Russian drone strikes targeted the Black Sea port of Odessa. The Ukrainian military shot down 56 out of least 87 drones launched by Russia over various regions of the country, according to a representative from the Air Force. Victoria Roshiana, a 27-year-old Ukrainian journalist, died in Russian detainment. She went missing last year in occupied Russian territory during a reporting trip. Russian President Vladimir Putin met with Iran's newly elected president, Mossad Pezeshkian, according to the Kremlin. Putin said he wants to create a new world order of Moscow's allies to counter the West. A Russian court sentenced an American, Stephen James Hubbard, for fighting for Ukraine. Hubbard, a native of Big Rapids, Michigan, was sentenced to 6 years and 10 months in a penal colony. On to the rest of the news. PBS included short segments on several cases the Supreme Court will hear in its new term. There's a lot of them. So if you want to check it out, there's a hyperlink in the newsletter. PBS included short segments on the Nobel Prize winners for medicine, chemistry, peace, physics, and literature. Han Kang was the first South Korean to win the Nobel Literature Prize and the second person from her country to win a Nobel Prize in any category. She was the most interesting, so I included her instead of all of those people. There's so many. The Georgia Supreme Court reinstated a ban on abortion after 6 weeks after a lower court threw it out on the grounds that it violated the state's constitution. 13 states have filed lawsuits against the social media app TikTok, claiming it's addictive and harmful to children. The Biden-Harris administration issued a final rule requiring drinking water systems across the country to identify and replace lead pipes within 10 years. To support that requirement, EPA is announcing $168 million in newly available drinking water infrastructure funding for the EPA Region 8 states of Colorado, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Utah, and Wyoming through the bipartisan infrastructure law. I want to point out, most of those are red states. M15 Director General Ken McCallum said that there's been a staggering rise in assassination attempts, sabotage, and other crimes on UK soil by Russia and Iran. N15 is sort of like the spy CIA version, but in the UK. And I'm sorry if I'm getting that wrong, but that's what I could pick up from what I read. Okay, talks between Boeing and striking workers have stalled while the company has cut 17,000 jobs, or 10% of its workforce. Inflation dropped to 2.4%, while unemployment benefits rose to the highest level since August 2023. TD Bank was hit with a $3 billion fine for failing to monitor money laundering by drug cartels. The U.S. Department of Justice said in a statement that TD Bank had long-term, pervasive, and systemic deficiencies in its procedures of monitoring transactions. Cissy Houston, mother of the late Whitney Houston and two-time Grammy-winning singer, died at the age of 91 at her home in Newark, New Jersey. Houston performed along Elvis Presley and Aretha Franklin. Houston was in the well-known vocal pop group The Sweet Inspirations with Doris Troy and her niece Dee Dee Warnick. Luis Clemente Tiant Vega, Cuban-born right-handed Major League Baseball pitcher, died at the age of 83. He played for teams in 6 cities, but was best known for his time with the Boston Red Sox, where he led the team to a World Series and became a beloved player. His bio was crazy. Highly recommend if you want to look him up, hyperlink. I just couldn't include the whole thing. It's way too long. Lily Ebert, another one that's fascinating. Look this woman up. She's beautiful. Lily Ebert, a Holocaust survivor and author of a best-selling memoir, Lily's Promise, died at the age of 100. Ebert shared her Holocaust stories with millions of followers on her TikTok account, which was managed by her great-grandson. I did check that out. I was crying through the whole thing. It's beautiful, though. She's a beautiful woman. Ethel Kennedy, widow of Senator Robert F. Kennedy, died at the age of 96. Her 11th child was born after her husband was assassinated as he campaigned for the Democratic nomination for president in 1968. She never remarried. Kennedy spent the rest of her life dedicated to her children and the legacy of her late husband. And those are all the stories. Believe it or not, they didn't mention Ethel Kennedy, not the shows I was watching. So next up, we have top 5 topics on PBS, and we compare them to the top 5 topics on Fox. We're going to start with Fox. Number 1, 27%, Kamala bashing. We're going to see a lot of that until the election. Hurricane Milton, storm and aftermath, 20%. Trump 2024, 15%. Misinformation on FEMA, 11%. And Obama bashing, 5%. That's how much they talked about Obama. He took up 5% of the airtime. So misinformation on FEMA, I want to clarify, that was them talking about, like, I can't believe they're saying we're promoting misinformation on FEMA. That's what the segment was like. And so that's what I called it. That's how much they talked about it, 11%. They were just so defensive. You know, like, what network paid out $787.5 million in the largest defamation settlement in history? That would be you, Fox. That would be you. Next up, we have PBS NewsHour, top 5 topics. We start with Hurricane Milton, storm and aftermath, 21%. Presidential election, 13%. Israel-Hamas war, 9%. Artist profile, 9%. And 1-year anniversary of October 7th, 8%. I want to preface that PBS went out of its way. They try. I think they do a pretty good job of presenting information about that conflict without, picking a side or politicizing it. They try very, they're not always perfect. I think they do a good job compared to other media that I've seen. What they did, this is how they handled it. The Friday before October 7th, they had a segment from the Palestinians' perspective, and they said, on Monday, we're going to show you from the Israeli perspective on the actual anniversary. And they did. So I just wanted to preface that because it's a very contentious issue. And I just wanted to give a little bit of context to what that was about. If you want to see a network that tries to not pick a side or politicize it, PBS, they're not always perfect, but they do the best job, I think, out of U.S. media. I would say that. Highly recommend them because they include a lot of detail, which is one of the things I love about PBS, because there's so many specifics in their segments. It's not surface, whereas Fox is all surface. Anybody watching Fox, no matter what you think about that conflict, you would know very little about it because they don't include any specifics. The segments are short, they're surface. It's just it's like a lot about like, oh, look, there's things blowing up. That's it. I mean, it's horrible. It's the worst coverage, terrible. I think Trey Yanks does the best job he can. He's their war correspondent. He's a young man. When they actually use him, which is hardly ever. It's so depressing. Anyway, so words used on Fox for the week ending December 13th, 2024. Trump, 344 times. Kamala, 187. Biden, 151. FEMA, 83. Milton, 78. Obama, 72. That's how much they talked about him. Misinformation, 68. Israel, 62. Border, 45. Helene, 39. Disinformation, 31. Polls, 18. Crime, 18. Look how low that is. Hillary, as in Hillary Clinton, 14. Inflation, 13. That's it. I guess when inflation is 2.4%, you don't talk about it. Economy, 12. That's incredibly low. Hunter, as in Hunter Biden, 5. And AOC, 0 again. I can't sing, so I don't do my tradition. But that's the end of the podcast. My throat's about to give out. We'll see if I can talk later this week. I don't know. I'm doing my best. I didn't want to let you down. So that's it for the podcast. If you'd like to become a paid subscriber, I always need you. Because I always lose people. If there's ever been a time that you were like, I'm on the fence, maybe it's $5 a month. How much is $5 a month? Very, very little in your life in the grand scheme of things. And you get fabulous exclusive content by me. And I'm killing myself all the time. I work a lot of hours. But anyway, you can go to my Substack for Decoding Fox News or my Patreon for Decoding Fox News. I also have a Venmo, which is in the linked tree. Somebody said thank you for mentioning it one time. So that's in the linked tree on my Twitter bio. I'm also going to be appearing on a live stream tomorrow night at 7 p.m. called Punching Up with Maya May. She is a comedian. She's a Black comedian, so I think that will be a good pairing because I have a background in comedy as well. If you'd like to see, it'll be 7 p.m. again tomorrow, live stream, Resolute Square. You can also find a version of this podcast on Resolute Square. If you'd like to check out more of my work, I'm available. I do stuff on Twitter, also known as X, Threads, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook. I think Blue Sky, which now lets me do 1-minute videos. And of course, my podcast mascots who've been a part of this show, whether you knew it or not, Odin and Thor send their love, and I will see you at the next podcast.
Resolute Square.